It'll start.
Hello and welcome to BQ Prime. A very good morning to all the viewers, and you're watching Trade Setup. Clearly, if you go to see, let's first quickly look at all the global headlines in trade today. You have Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who's seeing diminishing risk for the US to fall into recession and suggested that a slowdown in consumer spending may be the price to pay for finishing the campaign to contain inflation. Moving on, you have Federal Chair Powell also said that policymakers expect interest rates will need to move higher, however, to reduce US growth and contain price pressures. And this is even though they've held rates steady at their meeting last week. Moving on, as we know, US President Joe Biden and Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced defense and commercial deals to improve military and economic ties between the nations. General Electric plans to jointly manufacture engines with HAL for the Tejas light combat aircraft. In fact, HAL on the back of this will be in focus and investments coming in on the semiconductor side as well. Overall, if you see in terms of European markets, which closed lower on Thursday, and this is on the back of Bank of England, which has actually opted for a more hawkish 50 basis point rate hike. In fact, the index has posted a decline in all the four sessions so far this week. The UK consumer confidence has improved as well to the strongest. In fact, it's reached the highest in 17 months despite elevated inflation and soaring interest rates. Moving on, sad news there, but you have the Titanic subcrew, which are dead after the vessel's catastrophic implosion. There were five aboard tourists over there. A couple for yesterday's session, if you see, the entire submarine was missing, but now they've seen implosion that has happened. From the aviation space, you have Cathay Pacific Airlines, which is expecting to have returned to profits in the first 6 months of 2023 and finally emerging from the most damaging period in its 76-year history and raising the likelihood that it will post its first annual profit since 2019. So there could be some momentum in terms of aviation companies as well. Moving on, you have TikTok CEO, which is Papas, who's gone ahead and stepped down, and Xenia Mucha, previously a 20-year veteran at Walt Disney, will join TikTok as Chief Brand and Communications Officer. Recently, we heard of Nandan Nilekani donating a little over 300 crores to its alma mater IIT Mumbai, and now you have Warren Buffett, who will be donating $4.6 billion in Berkshire shares to charities. You have 3M company as well, who's agreed to pay as much as $12.5 billion over 13 years to go ahead and resolve the claims that so-called forever chemicals it manufactured for decades polluted the drinking water supplies across the US. So that's in terms of where the global headlines go. But let's quickly look at what's happening with crude because that's going to be important, taking into consideration paint companies, OMCs. Oil has actually plunged 4%, and this is mainly on the back of the interest rate hikes that have outweighed the lower US supply. In fact, it's actually overshadowed the EIA data as well. And it's heading for a steep weekly loss as the Fed is expecting further tightening. So, watch out for the OMC space pretty closely in trade today. You could have paint companies as well, which could see a sentimental up move in today's trading session. If you see in terms of US markets, overall, again you had Dow which ended pretty much flat but some positive moves coming in terms of S&P 500 as well as Nasdaq in overnight trade. In terms of Asia, a pretty mixed open is what we've seen. Mainly the key point to watch out for is the Japan inflation that has eased but has stayed above the Bank of Japan target, and it's outpaced the forecast, and this was mainly on the back of the price view. So that's what Asia is looking at. And in this, if you see in terms of SGX Nifty as well, that is indicating, I mean, the kind of cues that we're picking up is slightly somber on that end. So how the day pans out is going to be interesting to watch out for. Some news coming out of India as well with regards to Deloitte, where they've resigned as auditors for Byju's on filing delays. And interesting to note over here is that now the SEBI is actually tightening its whip, its leash with regards to all the malpractices that are being done. And they've also invited applications to hire 25 officials in the legal department. Lots happening at SEBI's end. You heard about Z Entertainment, post Z You're already seeing what's happening in terms of the delays between Z and Sony merger. After that, with regards to IFL securities, Edelweiss, where SEBI has looked at a lot of things, they've barred them, IFL specifically with regards to onboarding any new clients as well for the next 2 years. And now further applications that are being invited as well. Moving on, let's quickly see what's in store for us on Friday in terms of the trade setup. Overall, yes, there is volatility, but this was mainly on the back of the weekly expiry yesterday. And every bounce that we saw in yesterday's session, we saw selling pressure, and that's where we saw profit booking that started to creep in. In fact, we're just 1.9 points away from an all-time high. Now, whether we'll be able to establish that in today's session or not is anyone's guess. Though analysts are saying that the markets is still a buy on dips strategy, and that's what investors are doing as well. Coming in at lower levels, selling at higher levels, and that's what is creating the kind of pressure that we are seeing. The clear support, if you go to see, is at around 18,742 currently. So that is something which will help us decide the trend as well. And you have Bank Nifty that has continued to consolidate. It's not really able to hold above levels of 44,000. And even if it crosses 44,000 in intraday trading session, it again sees profit booking coming in. So it's an absolute seesaw weekly expiry that we've seen as well in terms of domestic markets. Moving on, if you see in terms of the FI activity as well, the FI activity in terms of the last fortnight has been positive for a fifth consecutive fortnight, and we've seen a total flow of almost around $7.36 billion in the last 6 months. Now, the key sectors which have seen the largest inflow is the financial services space as well as the automobiles and the component space. So, these are the two sectors which have seen the highest inflow. Apart from that, if you see in terms of materials, that has actually reversed the six consecutive fortnightly inflow, and it saw an outflow in this fortnight. Interesting was capital goods. It suddenly started to pick up. It's seen the highest inflow of $612 million versus what it saw in the last 2 years. So these are few sectors which are giving you cues as well as to where the momentum is actually building in. Moving on in terms of stock specific action, we did see block deals that did come in stocks like HDFC AMC, Shriram Finance, and Timken, on the back of which you have FTSE, which has gone ahead and increased their weightage on all the three counters. In fact, the adjustment will be done from today and it will lead to a cumulative inflow of $44 million, which means watch out for these three counters pretty closely in trade. Moving on, if you see in terms of sectors, you have the IT sector that will continue to remain in focus. Yesterday, we told you about Accenture, which would be reporting earnings. Now, if you see in terms of the numbers, it has lowered the FY23 guidance. That's the first key point. And secondly, the consulting business has come under pressure, and that's exactly what my colleague Tushar also mentioned to us yesterday due to the slowdown in deal making. If you talk about the key highlights, the revenues have come in a tad in line with what the street was expecting. Operating income as well is at around $2.36 billion, and if you see the adjusted earnings per share has seen a growth of 14%. Now the growth guidance, they've got it down to 8 to 9% from a 8 to 10%. Now how the IT sector will actually react and trade is something we need to watch. There could be some bit of pressure that could be coming in today's session, which would be more sentimental. Apart from that, there is weakness in the cement space as well, which we saw in yesterday's session, and that's mainly because the lower raw material price trend is weaning off, and that's something that could put pressure in terms of cement counters for a second consecutive session. Let's quickly move on to the other stocks that will be in focus today. You have a GAIL and IOC. Up move could be expected in terms of GAIL as they've beat IOC to win the license for Gurdaspur Jammu gas pipeline. So some momentum could be coming in there. Moving on, you have Bharat Petroleum that will be in focus as well. And they are looking to consider right shares issue on the 28th of June, where they have planned a board meeting. So watch out for BPCL and any which ways. On the back of the crude movement, you will have OMCs that will be in focus. HCC, as we know, there was a block deal. You have Asia Opportunities Mauritius, who's gone ahead and sold 46.5 million shares in terms of HCC. So continue to watch out for that counter. Eros International could see pressure in today's session, and this is because SEBI has passed an ex parte interim order against the company for alleged misstatements in the books of accounts. We were just talking about it, where SEBI has now directed BSE to appoint a forensic auditor to examine the books of the three companies that have been listed on the stock exchange. Again, it's Thinking Pictures, Media One, Global, Spicy Entertainment. And these are few of the companies where the diversion had happened. And Mr. Sunil Lulla, who's the managing director, has been barred from holding any key managerial positions or directorship in the company. We've been talking about it as to how SEBI has been tightening the leash as well. And that is for the good overall to clean up all the wrongdoings that have been happening so far. HDFC will be in focus as well. They've gone ahead and divested a 9.65% stake in Rural Shores. They've sold their entire stake in HDFC Property Ventures and HDFC Venture Capital, and they've bought stake and voting rights in an interior design company which is Bonito Designs and 914 CCPs of Relata, which is entitling them a stake of around 4 to 7%. So you could see HDFC that is in focus. Landmark cars will be in focus as well. Our reports are indicating that TPG Capital is likely to sell 11% equity in Landmark through a block deal, and this is because the lock-in period ends. Media reports are suggesting this, and this could be at a price which is a 0 to 5% discount to the current market price. 11.25% stake is what they were holding. And ICICI Securities is the sole broker of the block deal as well. So let's see what happens. In fact, it's the season of block deals where a lot of companies which are seeing their lock-in periods end from the IPO, and that's where the selling is coming in. In fact, an interesting story you would be able to read on BQ Prime as well as to which are the companies which have seen selling on the back of the lock-in period ending, and what's the kind of discount or up move that all of these investors have seen in those companies. Moving on, in terms of other counters, let's just quickly watch out for HAL as we already mentioned. Ether will be in focus as well. And overnight, they've announced that there is a QIP which has been approved for 750 odd crores. 926 rupees per share is what we are looking at. So watch out for Ether in trade. And in the IPO world, you have HMA. Agro Industries, they've got 98% demand so far. And Sant DLM has set the price range for 72 million in their IPO via the new shares. So that's in the primary markets. But overall, yes, it is going to be a stock specific day. How the markets react in today's session is going to be interesting as well, because one thing we need to watch out for is in terms of SGX Nifty. Clearly, it's indicating a downtick of around 22 points. A start somewhere near the 18,800 mark is what we are seeing. But whether we will be able to cross those life high levels in today's session is going to be interesting. IT, watch out for that sector. Cement, watch out for that space pretty closely in trade as well. So lots to line up. In fact, you will hear further detailed analysis in terms of the IT sector in our next show, Trade Talks, at 8:30. Thank you for watching.